This episode is brought to you by Describe. Link in the description for 10% off your first subscription payment.
Holy crap, this is a lot of cardboard. Hey guys, welcome to Atmoseeker. I've been saving up all this cardboard for a big project. I think it's finally time there to get round to it. Let's check it out after this. Alright, so we've got a whole bunch of this cardboard, and the idea is I want to make an immersive large-scale dungeon for my Dungeons & Dragons games, but I also want to keep it portable and collapsible for easy storage and transport if I want to hit the road or set it up at a friend's place. And it's going to be good to hide a lot of cables and pipes and suspend any kind of props and extra things to create immersive space for Dungeons & Dragons. So we're going to use a whole bunch of this cardboard, and I'm going to augment it with some 3D printable files that we'll be designing over there. All right, so we're at the computer. We're going to design some 3D printable files to help speed along this process a bit. I did go ahead and make a little cardboard prototype to begin with some EVA foam sheets and some hot glue as well. The texture out on it was actually turning out pretty good. The only problem is I worked out that I would need about 36 of these panels, and that sounds like a lot of work. So I think I'm going to design a little 3D printable texture plate that we can use to kind of speed up that process a little bit. And also we're going to need something to kind of construct these all together. So we're going to design a bracket of sorts to kind of hold it all together, keep it nice and strong. So we'll design that, print a few prototypes, and then we'll see if we need to make any adjustments. So we've 3D printed a whole bunch of pieces, and we've learned a few things along the way of how to try and make these things a bit more efficient. Basically, what we've got is we've got our main bracket here. Because it's a square shape like this, I want stuff to be easily storable. So I thought I'd split up the file into 4 corners, so that way you could even load up the print bed a lot more efficiently and have quite a few of these kind of stacked on, as well as storing it as well. You can have it in little piles like that, which makes it a lot easier. So we've got like this base that has a couple of grooves in the top and bottom, so we can use that to kind of slot in these panels, which works pretty well. And we're going to have 4 around them to make these large dungeon columns. Now you can see on the front here as well, we also printed out our texture plate. This one's been kind of designed with this pattern in mind, that you can orientate it in different rotations to get slight variations in it. I also designed one of these additional panels which has a little hole in it. I thought that might be some good utility for hanging some things or running cables into the columns and stuff if we needed to. All right, let's make one of these stone panels. So I've got some cardboard there from the pile, and I've got some of these 3D printed texture plates. I've got 3 of them here. They're about 19 centimeters across if you wanted to make some of these panels without 3D printing some of these. But it does make it a lot easier, because we're basically going to have 3 of them like this for our texture. And to do that, we're going to use some hot glue to attach these. So rather than putting glue onto these PLA printed panels, if you do that, it'll melt and warp the plastic quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is, rather than having to measure out anything, I'm just going to trace the outside of this just roughly, and then with the hot glue from this guy, I'm just going to run some hot glue around there, around the edges. And you see it there, it's coming out pretty hot. I think this is a hot temperature glue gun. I'm going to just give that a few seconds before laying it down. And then, just because we've got that outline, we know exactly where to place that guy. Press that down there. Next panel down. Same thing, we'll trace around the outer of it, just so you know about where to put that glue. And I'm going to try and get it down nice and close, as close as we can to that previous panel, just so we have as little a seam as possible. Press that down nice and firm. All right, last one down. Now you can rotate these to get some variation on the texture. I'm gonna rotate it that way, just so it's kind of breaks up the pattern a bit. And with that all glued on now, it's easy to just grab a knife here. You don't have to use a ruler or anything. You just run along the edges. Nice solid panel here. Now, something I've noticed whilst creating some of these panels is that some cardboard is thicker than others. The initial prototype panel that I made with the EVA foam and the hot glue was a lot thinner than the sturdy cardboard from these furniture boxes, which isn't a drama, even if you've glued on the panels like this. To make it fit within the brackets, you can just grab something heavy, or I'm using one of these ab rollers to kind of roll it on the edges and flatten those a bit, so that they'll fit nice and snug into those brackets. Whoa, this is huge! I can't believe how big this is coming. This is going to be amazing. It's just slightly less tall than me, but you're going to be sitting down and this is going to be for more of a around the table type setup. So pretty happy with the scale of this thing and the texture of it. I still have quite a few panels to make, but now we're just going to try doing some test painting of some of these stone panels, just because I'm curious about how to get some more texture on them, and I want to try and paint them as efficiently as possible. All right, so I've got a couple of panels here. I was starting to do a bit of a test on.
Hey, are you forgetting about something?
What's that, Braino?
Don't forget about today's sponsor.
Ah, it's time to talk about today's sponsor, Describe.
Okay, mate, plug in. I'm connected to over 13,000 scenes, places, monsters, and spell descriptions from Describe.
So you're saying this will make my D&D games more immersive?
Oh yeah! You're about to get a whole ton of professionally written stuff. Hold on to your butts! Ah, crap, I killed him. Oh wait. Hey buddy, how you feeling?
So much.
Too much?
I think you also included the new Opus tool, which has a huge library of music and sound effects.
Oh, how'd that get in there? That's a massive amount of immersive sound. I'm just gonna suck that back out.
All right. Wow, we've done quite a few panels right now, but we're just going to be moving here just because it's going to be a little bit easier to show what's going on here. So right now I've got a few panels that I've been playing around with different techniques. Like this one, I've used some acrylic paint and some sponge to create this kind of stone texture, which looks pretty good. The only problem is that it takes quite a while to get this kind of effect, and I've got quite a few panels to get through. So that's good if you've got the time for it. But I've also tried again by painting some of these grooves and cracks by hand, and that was a little bit too time intensive too. That was probably about over an hour's of work. So to keep things speedy, I thought I would try with the airbrush to kind of get a lot of that texture and getting into these cracks and stuff. But I soon realized that because of the fine nature and detail work around these grooves, it was just becoming too hard to get a clean result. So we've put together some of these stencils that will fit perfectly into some of these cracks. And you see they can puzzle right in there. And that's going to give us some good clean masking for some nice results. So let's get a few of these panels out of here. I'm going to mask this guy up and we're going to paint it. Now, I am in a big garage and I've got a couple of doors open for some ventilation, but if you are in an enclosed space, make sure to use a proper respirator as well, because you don't want to be breathing any of this stuff. So I'm not going to be using any airbrushes or acrylic paints or anything. I'm just going to be using some rattle cans for some quick colors. So first off, I'm going to hit it with some sand colored spray paint. Now this is just going to be the color I'm using for my mortar, so you can use whatever you like. So I'm going to aim to hit it at all the groove areas. Should give it a good shake. And after that's had a moment to become kind of touch dry, I'm just gonna go through and add in all my little stencil bits. So we've got a special one for these little holy parts. So it's just about lining all these parts up now. All right, so now it's all kind of nicely masked away. I'm gonna grab the color of what my stone's gonna be. So in this point, I'm just gonna use some gray primer. So it could just be whatever you have on hand. And also now, just to add a little bit more variation, I'm going to just use some matte black on here for a little bit of shading. Mostly I found it's just playing around with those two colors to get something tonally what you're after. Finally, we're going to deal with this whole part here. First, let's just take off these stencils. Yeah, that's looking nice and sharp. Less fiddling too, which is nice. But now we're going to finally mask off this center area here. I'm going to use this stencil. I'm going to plop that on top. I'll just use a scrap piece of cardboard here to cover the rest. I'm going to use the black paint for the bulk of it and then accent it with some metallic. All right, so it looks a little bit cartoonish just because of how crisp all the colors are. It almost looks like a giraffe pattern there. But I'm going to use some of this gray to kind of help blend in some of these areas a bit. Yeah, just lightly doing that. And there we go. We got one panel painted, ready to go. Now I just got to do the rest of them. Oh, something I realized whilst designing all of this stuff and making all of these stencils is now printing all the individual texture plates is kind of optional. Just if you have your board or cardboard or wood or whatever you want, you can just lay out some of these stencils now. And because of how they're modularly designed, you can rotate them, print off as many of these as you like, cover larger type areas as well. And now with all our rattle cans, you can quickly make all these kind of cobblestone, stone wall kind of textures, which is pretty rad, especially if you want to try and save on some filament as well. That's a good way to kind of cut that. Now, that was a lot of painting. I've spent the last few days spray painting all these dungeon panels, and now it's finally ready to start assembling. You can see I've used a bunch of those colors to get those different textures and try to hide that seam with some of those stencils that we've been using. Now, everything in this pile right here, this is one 6 foot tall dungeon column. It's a flat pack situation, so you can store it nice and easy and not annoy the wife too much with all this giant Dungeons and Dragons stuff that we're printing. So to start piecing one of these dungeon columns together, we're going to be using a whole bunch of these bracket pieces. Now you can see on the side here we've got a couple of different slots which are going to allow us to slide in those dungeon panels that we've made. And you see the bottom slot here has an arrow to let you know which direction's up. Now there's a bit of a trick when sliding in these panels. You basically want to have a little bit of an overlap on the corners. That's going to make sure that we've got an optimal amount of strength, as well as only having one edge visible on each panel. Whoa! Now, this is what I call a dungeon, and especially one that you can flat pack and seal away when you're not using it. I think it's come together pretty well and reasonably quickly, especially with all those spray painting stencils. Those really saved my life. I would have loved to have spent a little bit more time getting some more texture on there, but something I can add over time for sure. All these 3D printable files will be available on the Atmoseeker store. And if you want a little extra bit of atmosphere to add to these things, these little holes are great. If you add one of these little metal pegs onto it, something like this, and then you can hang your little 3D printable Atmoseeker dungeon torch on here for some extra atmospheric lighting, which is super exciting. Additionally, I've also been designing these different themed panels like these Star Wars panels. So if you want to get early access to files like these, the Patreon is the best place to go. Like these fine folk who've been supporting me, thank you for your amazing support, with a special shout out to Anthony Von Olen, Blake Darley, Charisma on Command, Chris Andrus, Constructed Chaos, Darkfire Designs, Dr. Justin L. Hamrick, John A. Johnson, Mini Wargaming, Nathan Mack, Devante, Michael Dykes, and Jonathan. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Sebastian, and let's create and inspire.